Welcome to my 203rd video on my work with OO gauge. This is a follow-up to my previous video on my efforts with the Hornby Dublo and Wrenn 060 diesel-electric shunter models. After the efforts shown in the previous video, I had one more idea. Basically, there was no easy way to swap over the wheel sets, so I couldn't really convert the Wrenn chassis to 3-rail and the Dublo chassis to 2-rail. And I already tried just putting the Wrenn armature into the Dublo chassis and it wouldn't run at all when power was applied, so clearly the Wrenn armature wasn't quite compatible with some aspect of the other Dublo motor parts. Couldn't completely convert the chassis and couldn't just swap over the armatures. So, what if I swapped as many of the motor parts as possible over from one chassis to the other? The armature, the bearings, the motor cap, the magnet, the brushes, etc. I decided to give that a try, and started by removing motor parts from the Dublo chassis. I undid the nut on the top of the center rail pickup bar, removed the connector for the wire to the brush, and then replaced the nut to hold the center rail pickup in place. Next, I removed the brush springs and took out the brushes. Then I unscrewed the 4 screws holding on the motor cap and removed the motor cap and took out the armature. Next, I did something similar to the Wrenn chassis. Moved the springs over and took out the brushes, and then undid the 4 screws and removed the motor cap. I transferred the Wrenn magnet to the Dublo chassis, and then put the Wrenn armature into the Dublo chassis and put the Wrenn top bearing onto the top of that armature. Then I put on the Wrenn motor cap, screwing the top bearing into the motor cap from the bottom. I find that's the easiest way to get the motor caps for these things on with the bearing properly fitted on the armature. Once the Wrenn motor cap was screwed all the way down onto the Dublo chassis, I screwed the top bearing down until it tightened on the armature and then backed it off half a turn and locked it in place with a lock nut. At this point, the Wrenn motor cap was installed with the Wrenn armature onto the Dublo chassis, but the Wrenn motor cap still had one of its brushes connected to the side pickups on the Wrenn chassis. I inserted the Wrenn brushes into the Wrenn motor cap on the Dublo chassis and positioned the springs to hold those brushes in place. With things like that, I applied power directly to the brush mountings on the Wrenn motor cap now installed on the Dublo chassis. The ends of the body are on pieces of rubber to keep the wheels off the ground. This worked. The Wrenn motor parts appeared to operate okay in the Dublo chassis. So now I wanted to actually swap over the pickup arrangements. I would need to connect that black wire coming from the brush mounting to the nut from the center rail pickup. So I cut the wire to allow for the required changes to the connections. I put the connector for the center rail pickup on the wire from the Dublo motor cap into one of the clips of my helping hand and desoldered the wire from the connector. Then I stripped and tinned the end of the wire from the Wrenn motor cap and soldered the end of that wire to the connector. This allowed me to mount that connector back under the nut on the end of the center rail pickup bar, so connecting the Wrenn motor cap in the Dublo chassis to the Dublo chassis' center rail pickup. I checked this connection by applying power to the center rail pickup and to the other brush holder. The motor operated okay, so my connection was working. I tried the chassis on my 3-rail tracks. It did work, but the wrong way round, going backwards when the controller was set to forwards. I had mounted the Wrenn magnet into the Dublo chassis in the same orientation that it had been mounted in the Wrenn chassis, but apparently it needed to be mounted the other way round in the Dublo chassis. So I opened up the Dublo chassis again and remounted the magnet, rotating it 180 degrees. That black line that's now at the front was at the back before. I tried the Dublo chassis with the Wrenn motor parts on the 3-rail tracks again, and now it ran in the correct direction. It also ran for multiple circuits without any signs of slowing down, so apparently this exercise was to some degree a success. Given that I now had the Dublo chassis running 3-rail with the Wrenn motor parts, I now wanted to try to get the Wrenn chassis running 2-rail with the Dublo motor parts. I didn't expect this to be a complete success, as I was pretty sure that the Dublo armature was defective. but I wanted to try to at least see how it would run. I stripped and tinned the ends of the wires and soldered the wire from the Dublo motor cap that used to go to the centre rail pickup to the wire from the Wrenn chassis side pickups. Before soldering the wires, I slid a piece of thin heat shrink onto one of the wires. Once the wires were soldered together, I slid the heat shrink over the join and heated it to seat it in place. Then I installed the Dublo magnet and armature and screwed the Dublo motor cap into place on the Wrenn chassis. I tried the Wrenn chassis with the Dublo motor parts on my main Hornby layout. It worked okay. Actually, it worked better than I had ever got the Dublo armature to work on my 3-rail tracks in the Dublo chassis, although it did eventually slow down and stop after running for quite a while. So now I had the Wrenn motor parts installed in the Dublo chassis for 3-rail running and the Dublo motor parts installed in the Wrenn chassis for 2-rail running, up to a point. I put the Dublo body back onto the Dublo chassis. I did have a bit of a hiccup when this arrangement made a nasty noise and stopped when I first tried it. I never did quite figure out why. After I removed the body and reseated the brushes, it seemed to work okay. Likewise, I reinstalled the Wrenn body onto the Wrenn chassis. This worked okay on my modern Hornby tracks for a while, although it did eventually slow down and stop, presumably due to issues with the Dublo armature. So now I'll finish with a little running video of the two models after these changes. Okay, so now, well, I don't even know how you describe this now. Well, it's the Dublo chassis, Dublo wheels, Dublo pickup, and it's got the Dublo body back on it now as well, but it's got the Wrenn armature, brushes, and top motor housing mounted in it. Will it work? I don't know at this point. It seems like if you get round one problem, another problem develops, so I'm not very confident, but if it has a problem, I think any problem it has now will be different to the problem it had before. That's about all I can say. So, you know, that's a sort of, this is Hybrid Loco 1. Hornby Dublo 3-rail chassis running with Wrenn armature, Wrenn top motor housing, Wrenn top bearing, Wrenn brushes, but sort of everything from the top, so the top of the motor and the armature is all Wrenn, but the rest of it's all Hornby Dublo. The body's Hornby Dublo, I just repainted it. So it runs with the same amount of power it ran with the Hornby Dublo armature this is of course after all my servicing and oiling and cleaning the chassis and everything, so it smooths down. It's running at 50%. What it's not doing now, at least as you can see, it's run round numerous times, and it's not doing that whole thing after 2 or 3 times round it grinds to a halt. That appears to have been a feature. Well, I don't know. I'm thinking a feature of the Hornby Dublo armature, but now I'm even less sure of that. I honestly don't know. So I wouldn't say I have a high degree of confidence that this model's going to work properly now. It's a weird hybrid, other problems may develop. The first time I tried to do this, the first time I put the body back on it and tried to run it with this chassis arrangement, it ran for about 1 circuit, then made a weird noise and stopped. Don't know what the problem was. I took the motor apart, put it back together again, and now it works. I think it might have been a problem with the brushes. The Wrenn brushes don't have slots in them telling you which way they're supposed to be orientated, so getting the brushes in and getting a good contact on the commutator can be a bit of a problem. Well, anyway, such as it is, it's slowing down now because I'm slowing it down, because I'm turning the power down. Whoops, nearly fell over. So there we go. So that's the Dublo chassis with the Wrenn motor parts, all the Wrenn motor parts that I could swap in, basically all the motor parts that I actually built into the chassis taken from the Wrenn. And for the moment, at least, it does seem to be running okay. Now this is the other side of the equation. This is the Wrenn chassis and body, but with the Hornby Dublo armature, upper motor housing, brushes and bearing, you know, on it. So it's, and the Wrenn body came like this. So it's the Wrenn, but with the Hornby Dublo motor parts. Famous last words, and it's not going. Was going, but now it's not. Nope. Oh, weird. Bad connection, maybe? I don't know. I did take the pickup plate off this, but not this time. Earlier in the process of messing around, I took the pickup plate off when I was just wondering if I could completely swap the chassis over. It is sort of slowing down now. Oh yes. Well, that's not too surprising, is it? Because we kind of know that this is an iffy armature, probably. So it does seem to be slowing down, but not as quickly as it did in the Hornby Dublo body. But yes, it does seem to be giving up now, which I suppose is only to be expected. It's sort of going up and down. I mean, it's running, frankly, better than it did. This is running better than I ever got the Hornby Dublo armature running in the Hornby Dublo body, but it's still a bit on the iffy side. Its speed seems to be rather going up or down, so not great. Hesitates over that point, but I think that's just because it's a short engine and it's just, you know, it's struggling a bit with pickup over the dead zone of the point. See, it slows down a bit from time to time, but it hasn't actually ground to a halt, famous last words. Is it going to grind to a halt now? I'm running at about 75% power, which is about what I was running the Wrenn at, you know, with its own armature. So I don't know. I wouldn't say this is running well, but it's running better than the Hornby Dublo armature was running in the Hornby Dublo chassis. Because I never got the Hornby Dublo armature to run this long in the Hornby Dublo chassis. Let's not over push it. Oh, famous last words. Now it's stopping, I think. Okay, so it has actually ground to a halt eventually, but it ran a great deal, longer than it did. Then I could get it to run. Then I could get it to run in the Dublo chassis.